All right, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our live Q&A call for Meditation Month 2023, Samadhi with Christina Feldman. I hope you all have been enjoying Meditation Month so far and finding some benefit and starting your year with daily practice. So today we are going to have a chance to ask any questions for Christina. Christina, welcome. And there's two ways you can ask questions today. So I would encourage you, we'd love to hear your voice. If you raise your hand and use that point on that little hand box at the bottom of the screen, we'll see a list of the names. And then when I call out your name, I'll enable your audio so you can ask your question to Christina directly. See a couple of people already raising their hands here. Another way that you can ask a question is to type it into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, if that's your preference. We'll be looking at those questions too, and I will read some of them out to Christina. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Today's session will be recorded. We'll be sharing it in an email, follow-up email after the event if you would like to watch it again or share it with someone who couldn't be here. And let's see, today's session is recorded. I think that's about it. Yeah, we know how to ask questions. So I'll just give a little intro to Christina. Christina Feldman is a co-founder of Gaia House and a guiding teacher emeritus at the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. The author of a number of books, she's been teaching insight meditation retreats internationally since 1976. She's one of the teaching faculty of the CPP program, dedicated to the study and application of the early teachings of the Buddha. She also teaches on the Buddhist psychological foundations of mindfulness to those training to teach mindfulness-based applications in England, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Christina's recent books include Boundless Heart, The Buddha's Path of Kindness, Compassion, Joy, and Equanimity, and Mindfulness, Ancient Wisdom Meets Modern Psychology, with co-author William Hukin. So welcome, Christina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting this and supporting this. So how do I get all the people up?
Yes, so we are going to just dive right in now with the questions. I'm going to start in the order in which these questions came in. So first up, we will take a question from Mary Workman. So Mary, I've just enabled your audio. Feel free to hop on with your question.
Great, I sure will. First of all, I wanted to thank you. Let me see if I can make myself seen. Can I, or is that possible?
I don't.
No worries, no worries.
So it's a webinar format.
No problem. I just wanted to say thank you for your teachings, because not only are they thorough, but they're incredibly clear. And I've been searching for a teacher with those qualities for a long time, and I'm so grateful to have you in my life in this way. I was raised in a very strange situation, and I know a lot of people come from dysfunctional families, but my mother has or had what we now know as schizoaffective disorder. And she was incredibly mentally and physically abusive, but incredibly intelligent. And what happens to me sometimes when I'm meditating is her negative and abusive voice comes into my mind. And I'm not sure, even though I've had a lot of study in hypnotherapy, a lot of study and therapy over my many years, I'm not sure how to release that negative talk when I'm trying to meditate.
When you say she comes into your mind, is it actually verbally? Is it image? Is it words? Is it?
It's her verbiage. It's the kind of words that she would use, but it's not necessarily her voice.
Okay. You know, I think in this path, the recommendation is pretty much always to turn towards what we're experiencing, even when it's very unwelcome or unpleasant. And, you know, perhaps rather than feeling that, you know, you somehow need to uproot this, because, you know, our mothers are in our bones. You know, they're not just in our minds, they're in our bones, you know, and without a transplant, you're probably not entirely going to uproot this. But maybe you could have a conversation with this voice. You know, what's happening? What does this need? You know, how are you doing, Mom? Um, there's space here for you, but I actually don't really need to sign up. You know, I actually don't really need to sign up anymore. For the words or whatever, you know, criticisms, judgments are there. I actually don't really need to sign up for this anymore.
Right.
You know, I think there's such a part of mindfulness. Actually, one of the images of mindfulness is how we learn to be a wise gatekeeper. You know, a wise gatekeeper at the gates of our own hearts and minds. And you know, we welcome in everything that really means to that supports us, that helps us to flourish, and we acknowledge, but actually don't entertain that which doesn't help us to flourish. You know, so it's kind of saying, you know, hello with kindness, but also with clarity. You know, I actually don't really need to sign up for this.
And I just bought your mindfulness book, so I'm very excited about that.
Okay, you'll probably find that image in there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Our next question is from Karen Kingsolver. See, Karen, do we have you here?
Thank you. Yeah. Christina, I'm sorry that we can't be on our cameras. It makes it easier for the speaker, I think.
Yeah, it does.
You've done a lovely job. I'm so appreciative of your teachings and your style and your knowledge and work that you've done. One of the things you mentioned that was, I'm not sure exactly what you meant, but you said that you advised us to be specific in our intention with a particular meditation. And I always start my meditation with either thinking like the front of my, the tip of my nose or some specific, very physical, specific sensation, or maybe it's during the day, I'm not meditating, but I think I want to be kind today. And I'm wondering what you meant when you talked about being very specific, about the meditation time that we're setting aside. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Karen. I mean, you know, my time was very limited when I was sort of getting the sessions together. But I think it is so important. I see, you know, many people have wonderful intentions, but sometimes they're overgeneralized. You know, like I'm just going to be mindful today. Um, you know, and I feel it, or sitting down on a cushion and thinking, well, you know, what is this time all about? You know, what am I going to do in this sitting? I think that many of the practices and many of the pathways that the Buddha offered to us um, really take some time to digest and to develop. You know, and it's my sense, and I know this in my own practice, that it's really worthwhile to stay with something for a committed period of time. You know, maybe I'm going to practice samadhi, you know, and maybe I'll stay with that for 6 months. You know, every time I sit. I mean, without being overly rigid about it. Um, but for it to bear some fruit, it really does need that kind of more sustained attention. For myself, I mean, I do this certainly in my own formal practice, that I will have a meditative intention that I will really stay with for a period of time. You know, and personally, you know, I would stay with the intention of samadhi for, you know, 6 months in my meditative calendar every year. It doesn't exclude anything else, you know, it doesn't like mean that we don't have insights or we don't develop kindness, but it certainly is so helpful in developing a mind that is a friend. But I also have I also set for myself a life intention that I stay with for a year, you know. My most recent one, and some of you will know this, will have heard me say this, is to have no more neutral people in my life. You know, it doesn't mean that I chase people down the road with metta, but it means that I pay attention to the people who cross my path. All the many people I don't know, who are easily rendered invisible through inattention. And I've found that to be, quite transforming, actually, to actually look at people, to see the human story, if appropriate, to smile, to say hello, but to have no more neutral people in my life. And, I will stay with a couple of years ago, I had the intention to stop hurrying for a year. It's a life intention. And, it was so rewarding that I've never been tempted to take it up again. But bearing in mind that these qualities, these pathways, require dedicated time and attention. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And I apologize that we cannot have the participant videos on. It just has to do with the webinar format, but we will look into changing that for next time. And our next question is from Dujan. Dujan, are you with us?
Hello, yes, I'm from France, so excuse me if my English is not very good. I have 2 questions, but I will be quick. You hear me?
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, donc the first question is the role of understanding and reflective thought in Buddhism, because we always hear about thought as mind wandering, obsession, rumination, and what about understanding, reflection? For instance, when Mrs. Feldman was writing her wonderful book, she was engaged in other different activities. So I think that the being one with the body and the mind and the present moment, it's somewhat easier when we are engaged in physical activities like cutting carrots in the kitchen or walking. How do we do? What is the place when we are engaged in disinterested reflection or understanding activity? This is one question. If you permit me, I will ask the other one, or I can wait if there's some time for other questions.
Let me respond to the first one, Dujan, if that's all right. There is actually a very big place for reflective thought in the Buddhist path, and I think it's often overlooked or even somewhat dismissed, almost as if all mental activity is somehow a distraction or an interruption. When the Buddha speaks about the path of developing insight, he says, first, we listen to the teaching, because this points us into territories that we may not know. So first that we listen to the teaching, and then we reflect upon it. What does this mean to me? How do I understand this? Is this true in my experience? What are the implications of this? And then we go on to explore it experientially and hopefully to embody it. But that reflective piece is actually what allows us to bring in all of the areas of investigation, of skillful questioning, of making sense of what we hear. I think it's a huge part of the teaching, that it is why, the Buddha would so much encourage his students when he was alive to reflect on the teaching, to reflect on what he was saying. It's important not only about the teaching, but I think sometimes this is quite important in addressing some of our more stuck places in ourselves. That same element of reflection, not in the times when we're lost in an obsession or a rumination, but sometimes I think in the most quiet moments of our day, it can be quite helpful to invite some of those stuck places quite consciously into our attention, and to be able to ask a few simple questions, of, what does this need? What is the stickiness? Why is this holding onto me in a way? And listen for whatever arises, not being too quick with trying to answer those questions, but to bring in that capacity for contemplation and reflection is really important.
Thank you. I don't know if I ask the second question or...
Yeah, go ahead.
But the second question is perhaps a disturbing one, but I don't see the answer to this question often. So in the 4 steps of awakening, we know that the last step is the step of non-returner. So how does when thought together with the first noble truth, doesn't this somehow downplay the wonder of just being here? I mean, the majority of people, I presume, would want to be born again in a human, form. What to make of this? Is it important?
You can read the stages of awakening in a number of different ways, but what you do see in the stages of awakening of, you know, stream enterer, non-returner, arahant, what you see actually is a process of confusion and delusion falling away. That's actually how those stages are characterized, by what falls away and what emerges. Because the falling away of something doesn't leave a vacuum, like the falling away of doubt. You know, you find an unshakable faith, you know, the falling away of attachment to falling away of clinging, you see in a remarkable amount of responsiveness and freedom. There's many different ways of reading the different stages of awakening. The way that I see non-returner is we are non-repeaters. We are non-repeaters of, we are not returning to patterns of repetition of confusion. And that is actually what is falling away.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next question is going to be from Linda Miller. Linda, I've just enabled your audio.
Hello, thank you. I just want to say how I'm really enjoying this course. It feels very spacious and there's not masses of material to read and groups to be part of and so on. It's just spacious and I'm really enjoying it. At the same time, I have quite a lot of difficult things going on in my life at the moment. I mean, as an older person, illnesses start to become very predominant. My husband's in hospital at the moment. I'm due to have heart surgery sometimes. And I just feel I'm doing the course, which I love, but all these other things are going on as well. So I was wondering how to bring them more together. So I suppose that's my question.
You know, personally, Linda, I would suggest that there is no, you know, samadhi is not just a good times practice. You know, samadhi is truly a refuge in the times when our worlds feel to be crumbling. You know, this is what really protects the mind from worry, anxiety, rumination, being overwhelmed. You know, there is never, I think, a more important time to develop this capacity and this skill than in the times when our lives are most troubled. Because this is what, you know, when we're not, you know, not grounded or in that sort of calm abiding, we tend to be grounded in reactivity. So I think this is how we bring them together. You know, I would always, you know, whenever I teach, you know, whether it's the Brahma Viharas, or, you know, kindness, joyfulness, compassion, equanimity, or whether I'm teaching samadhi, I would always follow it with the phrase, in the midst of this struggle, in the midst of this illness, in the midst of this, you know, potential loss. This is actually where I developed this capacity for a calm abiding, because anything else renders our responses ineffective often. You know, our reactivity often makes us quite ineffective in our response. So I think this is how we bring them together, you know, in the midst of this, you know, where do I find that integration, that gatheredness of body, mind, and present moment? Where do I find that refuge and that ground of stilling inwardly and really turning that into a verb, not just a state or a noun, but calming and stilling and allowing and grounding. This is where I think the practice of samadhi truly comes alive.
Yes, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda and Christina. And next we'll take a question from Robert King.
Okay, I guess you can hear me okay.
Yes.
I completed your course there on Four Noble Truths. I just thought I'd let you know that. I really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. But I got some questions about it, mainly around sanghas. I'm wondering. Sanghas?
Sanghas.
Yeah, sanghas.
Yeah.
I have a question about that. I'm becoming a fan of secular Buddhism, and I'm wondering, it sounds like secular Buddhism is saying that we don't really need the Sangha anymore, and we don't really need the teachers anymore. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. And then the other part of my question is, I'm wondering if I can use these kind of events as a Sangha. I'm actually looking for somebody just to talk to about this stuff. And I guess that's my question. Do we still need the Sangha? And
yes, we do.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think any of us walks this path alone. I don't think any of us awakens alone. We need the mirrors, we need the support, we need the honesty, the truthfulness of others in our lives. Otherwise, how do we even know where we are, or whether we're completely deluded or clear? No, I would suggest that we will always need sangha. And I'm not a big fan of the phrase secular Buddhism. I'm much more a supporter of Buddhism in secular settings, because I don't think secular Buddhism is a particular brand of Buddhism, but it is a way of cultivating this path in settings that are not particularly aligned with Buddhist faith or Buddhist religion. Where people are don't have that kind of alignment, and yet they're totally devoted to the path of awakening. So I prefer the phrase Buddhism in secular settings.
What was that phrase again?
Buddhism in secular settings.
Oh, okay. Well,
I can teach without using a single Pali word. I can teach without using a single list, but the path is the same.
Okay, so we need a Sangha, so how do we find one?
Well, I've been, over the last few years, obviously, mostly I have been teaching online, and, initially I thought, well, there's no community in this, and I've been so surprised and so touched by the ways that it's possible to form communities in online formats. And I teach several extended programs in an online way, and I think over time, particularly when we have like peer breakout groups, questions, I feel there's quite a strong sense of community. And this has been so powerful for people who are actually quite isolated in our world, who don't have the luxury of going on retreat or, attending programs in person. People tell me, yes, this community really matters to me.
So do you have a regular, at your facilities there, do you have a regular time when you get together on a regular basis?
If you look at the Bodhi College website, you'll see a lot of what I do particularly.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
check that out.
BODHI College.
And we'll put a link to Bodhi College in the chat. And I can also see a few other participants. Susan is suggesting the Secular Buddhist Network, and Kathy is also suggesting the Secular Buddhist Network as an online sangha. So lots of options out there. And Shannon says Spirit Rock offers online sanghas, cloud sanghas that meet weekly for 90 minutes.
And
So
most Dharma centers do now. This started during the pandemic, and actually they've been so valued that they have continued them even as retreats go back face to face.
Yes.
So thank you.
Can you repeat those again? Spirit Rock, was it?
Yes.
Spirit Rock, Gaia House, I believe IMS has something. So just look at some of those major teaching centers, and you will find regular group meetings.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Next, we will go to Barbara Sinclair. So Barbara, whenever you're ready, feel free to hop on here.
Hi. I just want to say how much I am enjoying the articles each morning. I really look forward to them. I have a bit of I think, an odd problem. I've been meditating for some years, and initially it was difficult for me to relax, especially when I was in the completion phase or doing the looking in Vipassana. And can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. And I've quite overcome that problem, and I'm quite relaxed now. But a couple of years ago, during those phases when I was dropping the conceptuality and just allowing my mind to rest, I go cross-eyed. And I've tried tightening up, but it doesn't help. My current method is just simply to go with it and try to not get in my head about it. Do you have any suggestions for this problem?
Well, I actually have no idea why you're going cross-eyed, but you're not going to die from it.
No, I'm not.
And I think just to let it be. I mean, I could say, sit with your eyes slightly open and have something in front of you on the floor that you can focus on. But I'm not convinced it's something you need to fix. I think it will correct itself.
Okay, well, that cheers me up. Because I've tried everything and I can't.
Yeah, and you can get too busy trying to fix it.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
And turning it in, almost pathologizing it. Whereas, I don't think it really needs to be an issue.
Okay. All right. That's good to hear. I sort of came to that conclusion, but it's good to hear it from someone else. I loved what you said about noticing everybody. And in our sangha, we have a wonderful sangha here in Maine. And we talk about our local grocery store and what a great place that is to practice and noticing the people in the grocery store and the suffering.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. We're going to go to a question from the Q&A here before we continue with the raised hands. Question from Upender. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. So this person asks, the guided meditation instructions encourage calming or relaxing the body and mind. How should I approach this without trying to force the mind to relax or calm down? What is the effort or focus involved here?
You can't actually force your mind to calm down. And, the more you try and do that, the more the mind will actually resist. the body is such an ally in this. If you can find even just one place in your body that actually feels quite easeful, it might be the touch of your lips together. It might be the palm of your hand. If you can find us even, and we all have those places in our bodies. My earlobes never complain. We all have those places in our bodies where there is easefulness. And I think part of the practice is actually almost foregrounding those places, foregrounding what is easeful rather than foregrounding what is tense or agitated. Foregrounding what is easeful, and initially just bringing your attention just in a kind of an exploratory manner to that place that feels easeful. Where is the edge? Where does it start turning into something else? What is the feeling tone of that easefulness? Is it pleasant? Is it spacious? And then you can almost begin to expand that sensation or that quality beyond what you've initially foregrounded. And when I teach samadhi, I will often use this kind of almost a camera lens metaphor, of the zoom lens and the panorama lens. So the zoom lens is when we actually sort of foreground something quite specific, such as a place of easefulness in our bodies. And then the panorama lens is when we begin to intentionally begin to expand that, and then coming back to the zoom mode. So it's almost like it's kind of a gross use of words, but it's almost like you're exercising the samadhi muscle. You do exercise the samadhi muscle, but foregrounding what is well rather than what is troublesome or difficult is actually so key, because the whole practice of samadhi actually builds upon that sense of easefulness and wellness. And it's not about getting everything else out of the way first. It's actually really highlighting what is already there and then beginning to build upon that. Yeah, I hope that's useful.
Thank you, Christina. We'll go to our next question from Anton Miller. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, thanks. My question has less to do with the course and just more a question that has arisen from years of meditation. And I think, Christina, some of your comments during this session sort of touch on my question, but it's got to do with kind of reconciling in a way the two streams that we're taught about when one's on the cushion meditating, the more broader mindfulness of the present moment and everything that comes up and just being aware of that, versus the stream that has more to do with focusing and concentration. And I know there's Pali words and Sanskrit words to describe those two things, but kind of balancing those or aligning those or lining them up or harmonizing them has always been a bit of a struggle, and I'm never quite sure in any one session and whether it's okay to sort of have some moments of focusing, let's say, on the breath or bringing attention to bear on the breath, and within the same session just being aware and mindful of everything that's going on, or whether one for some weeks or months should put more intentionality, as you said earlier, on the one stream and less on the other. Just how to kind of, my question is, what should be the approach to sort of balance those two streams off against each other and sort of focus on each one in one's daily practice?
Okay, so I mean, this might come as a little bit of a surprise to you, but in the early teachings, you don't find anywhere where mindfulness alone is recommended as a path of practice. What is really spoken about in the early teachings, of course, is this word bhavana that we translate as meditation is actually translated as to cultivate. So from the perspective of the early teachings, we're always cultivating something, either consciously or unconsciously. But from the perspective of the teaching, the whole path of awakening is about cultivating the wholesome and the skillful through different pathways. Now, the Buddha was very, very light on meditation instructions. The Satipatthana comes closest to kind of detailing a pathway of developing sati or mindfulness. Apart from the Satipatthana Sutta, the Anapanasati Sutta is, most of the other instructions are to do with samadhi in the text. So it's a huge question. But mindfulness in the early teachings is never a standalone quality. It is always working in cooperation with an extended family. It's probably the subject of a whole nother program. So it's a question of when we sit on a cushion, we ask ourselves, what are we cultivating just now? What is being cultivated just now? And it's really important to be clear on that point, because it's not just about turning up for whatever is there. Maybe we're cultivating, a simple knowing. That's an aspect of mindfulness. Maybe we're cultivating collectedness and gatheredness. Maybe we're cultivating kindness or joyfulness. But I think it's really helpful to know when we sit down or walk what it is that we are cultivating, what it is that we are bringing into being. I mean, the whole idea of mindfulness of being, this more generalized field of awareness is actually something much newer. And I'm not saying that that's wrong or that it's unhelpful, but it's a much newer kid on the block. And you actually need to see, there's questions we ask of ourselves in our practice. Do we see things falling away? Do we see qualities, wholesome qualities, liberating qualities, maturing and developing? Are we more effective in our lives? Is our practice actually making a difference to our lives? What would our partner say about what difference our practice is making in our lives? There are real questions to ask of ourselves in the path. That we're not waiting for something to happen. We actually have a hand in this. And I think part of having a hand in this is, having an honesty with ourselves about, where are we strong in this path? And where do we feel less strong? Do we find that we're very strong in kindness and compassion? And, do we find ourselves less strong in collectedness and gatheredness? Do we find ourselves strong in calmness, but not so strong in questioning and investigation? Because I think sometimes our ability to ask ourselves those questions is what gives us a pointer about, what it would be helpful to cultivate in our path and in our lives. And I don't know if that helps at all, Anton.
Am I still on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's a fabulous answer. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think just if I can have one follow-up point, part of it has been maybe a little confusion over the years from some, I think, long-standing Buddhist traditions like Dzogchen, where they seem to say that all you really have to do is simply sit there and whatever comes up and being aware of it is kind of the point. And that's been a bit confusing, and it's a little different because it makes it all very easy. It's like whatever comes up that's great. That's it. That's the path. But I think you're saying something slightly different, and I need to go back and reflect a little bit on what you just said versus some of these other options that make it all sound really easy, And
well, it shouldn't have to be torture, put it that way. But what I would say, because the early years of my practice were spent in the Tibetan tradition, and I think often what gets overlooked when people are attracted to the easefulness of Dzogchen is that generally Dzogchen is preceded by some very specific cultivations of samadhi and discipline. And it's not in the Tibetan tradition, in my understanding, and when I was in the Tibetan tradition, nobody just got dropped into Dzogchen. You did the preparatory practices first.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anton. I'm gonna pick up a question here from the chat. Lena Garrison says, I find sitting really hard. I don't like sitting, but I want to practice mindfulness and meditation. Can I do all the same things sitting as, say, for example, while I'm walking my dog every day? Can I cultivate the same attention and mindfulness while walking? And could that be just as effective?
Well, of course, you can cultivate mindfulness and awareness when you're walking or walking the dog. But I think there is something quite invaluable about setting a container for ourselves. You know, it's why, like when we do walking meditation, we always ask people, you know, make a path that has a beginning and a turning point, you know, and stay with the path, because there's something in that that really helps us to learn how to sustain both intention and attention. And I think the sitting container, you know, and of course you want to find a posture that's as easeful as possible for you. Um, but having a sitting container, you know, keeps bringing us back to that intentionality and sustaining intention and attention. And of course, it can be quite challenging, um, and especially in the beginning. But then it can indeed and does indeed become quite lovely. You know that you're returning to that container, and the posture itself embodies something. It's why we kind of ask people when we're teaching retreats, be upright if you can, because that wakefulness of the body, or the uprightness of the body, the stillness of the body, is really sending messages to the mind, to consciousness, to join in, to join in that stillness, to join in that wakefulness. So, of course, we would hope that we're endeavoring to be as mindful as possible, in the activities of our day. But there's something about this touchstone, this ground of, yeah, this is a dedicated space. It's a dedicated space, and in a way, it becomes almost a sacred space. That we actually know what this space is dedicated to. So I would just really encourage you to persevere. Don't be hard on yourself. Set minimum amounts of times. I'm going to be still for 10 minutes. Fantastic. And so that you're not kind of approaching it like some sort of test or challenge. That there's a friendliness to exploring that territory. And then you might find that, get up if you're uncomfortable, get up if the energy drops. But if you find that 10 minutes actually you're feeling really not too bad, just continue, and just listen to the signals of when it's the right moment to come out of that posture. But I just really would so encourage you to make that beginning.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Probably a relevant question for many of us. So we'll go to Bridget Cook next. Let's see, Bridget, whenever. There you go.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
My question relates to the article. I think it was one of the first ones that we looked at, by James Austin. And he's talking about samadhi, well, the semantics of samadhi. And he talks about internal absorption as being one sort of way of defining one interpretation of samadhi. And he says that one of the features of internal absorption is a distinctive closing off of all sight and sound. And he's talking about sensate loss. And I was just rather puzzled by this, because the meditation that I do is a mindfulness meditation, and that seems to be the opposite of mindfulness. With mindfulness, I'm aiming to sort of focus on the sense input and become embodied.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just found that puzzling.
Well, what he's referring to are what is usually goes by the name of jhanas, or absorption states, which are very profound states of samadhi. Now, I would mention that, I think when you read the text and when you listen to some teachers, jhanas or absorption states are are primarily meditative experiences that have beginnings and endings. They can be very transforming. They can be very insightful in retrospect. But other teachers and other places will speak about the jhanas or absorptions as being really developing certain qualities that the mind actually rests in, whether on the cushion or off the cushion. Now, in the text, you see the absorptions have certain characteristics. You know, the first absorption is about being absorbed into the quality of rapture. You know, the second absorption is about being absorbed into the quality of happiness, into the quality of peace, into the quality of equanimity and stillness. So you see in the text that this sense of absorption. Now, when you practice samadhi, for some people, not for everyone, but for some people, after the first absorption, there is a cessation of body awareness and there's a cessation of thought. And so there is a closing down of the sense doors. And what is present actually is simply that quality of joyfulness or happiness or peace or stillness. That's all that is there. And then, it lasts for a period of time, can last for quite a long time, can last for quite a short time. And then one comes out and there is a returning of actually sensory awareness. Now, this, as I mentioned, this is quite some refined development of samadhi, but it's not the same as mindfulness. It's not intended to be the same as mindfulness. The various pathways within the Buddhist teaching, they don't all lead to the same place. They develop different qualities. They develop different capacities, and samadhi is developing a particular capacity that has, remarkable benefits. The development of mindfulness can also has remarkable benefits. But we need to not try and marry these pathways together because they're not the same. They're very distinct pathways. And it makes no sense to try and marry them together.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. We'll take our next question from Luke Tinson.
Hi everybody. Thanks very much, Christina. It's been a great way to start the year. Just wanted to reply very quickly to Robert's question about the sanghas. I think, Robert, if you hang out a bit and try out different groups online, there are definitely sanghas around. I certainly find myself part of a group that I very much consider to be a sangha. My question links into what other people have been saying, actually. Anton came up with it, and the last person asking the question, so I hope it won't be kind of useless compared to what's already been said. But I think what people have been saying outlines a certain confusion around forms of meditation. I was happy to come onto this meditation month because I thought, I'll go back to exploring this samadhi thing, and I might know a little bit more about it. Now I think I've got a bit of a handle on sati, on mindfulness. I've done a Vipassana course, so I think I've got an idea what that is. Now, in some of the articles and in some of the things that I think you've said as well in the videos, Christina, it seems to me there have been quite a few references to mindfulness. So the previous questions have just been showing that there is a problem, a confusion around what's samadhi, what's mindfulness, where might they overlap. I'm now confused about what Vipassana meditation is, because from what I've been learning about mindfulness, they seem to pretty much be the same thing. I really don't know anymore. And it seems there's a few of us who've been kind of meditating for years and still don't quite know what the distinctions might be between these things. I won't go on more, but I just wondered if you've got any more kind of clarification or explanation as to why the Tricycle articles have quite a few times mentioned mindfulness on this course. So, yeah, what's going on?
I mean, I think, Luke, this is really a question of education, and I think today we tend to get almost this inherit almost a monochrome portrayal of what practice is. Whereas actually when you look more carefully, there are many streams of practice, many different streams of practice, and they have a different focus, and they develop and bring to fruition different aspects and potentialities of our own hearts and minds. But we shouldn't imagine that they're all the same, which is why, I've recommended, staying with something for a period of time, getting to know the territory of samadhi or getting to know the territory of metta, see what it does for you, see what it brings, rather than feeling there's just this kind of like overarching thing we call meditation. That's a very new view. Within the field of Vipassana, Vipassana meditation, the Buddha doesn't give any instructions around Vipassana meditation. The closest thing, as I've mentioned, is the Satipatthana Sutta and the ways of establishing mindfulness. But there's 100 different styles of Vipassana meditation. There's as many styles of Vipassana practice as there are teachers. And so, you're not going to find the Vipassana meditation. You're going to hear different teachers, what's been useful for them. And most of them will be drawing on the Satipatthana Sutta, on one aspect of the Satipatthana Sutta. Now, mindfulness is part, Satipatthana, the 4 ways of establishing sati, the 4 ways of establishing what we call mindfulness. And we just want to mention that mindfulness is it's a slightly misleading word. The early translators of the Pali Canon couldn't find a word that captured sati. And so they borrowed mindfulness from the Gospels, and it's become, somewhat kind of embedded in our culture. But sati, has so many different dimensions and so many different nuances. And, from the person standing on a watchtower with an inclusive view of the landscape around them, to a person walking through a marketplace carrying a bowl full of oil on their head, in danger of losing their life if they spill a drop. So, you find these huge nuanced territory within this word sati. And again, those nuances are not all the same. They're developing different aspects and potentialities, whether it's spaciousness, whether it's simple knowing, whether it's investigation, whether it's protection, developing different aspects and potentialities of our own consciousness. So it's good not to think of Vipassana meditation. There are practices that are directed towards developing understanding and insight. But don't get hung up on, I would suggest, don't get hung up on technique. There isn't a right technique, and there isn't a one technique. That's a very long answer, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you, Luke. We have time for a couple more questions. We're going to go to Joanne next. Joanne Nakonechny. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
That's okay. Joanne does very well. Thank you very much for these Samadhi course, Christine. It's just wonderful. I'm having a problem in that when I sit down and I am trying to calm the body, and I'm doing, I'm focusing, I'm on the breathing, everything's going well. And then if I'm in a place where I'm sort of in the middle of a project or something, I have very strong thoughts about the project. They're not negative. They're just totally focused on a project that I'm working on. And I'm having some success by just trying to focus on breathing gentleness in and breathing gentleness out. And that seems to be breaking apart that just solid block of thought. Is what I'm doing okay?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you that those thoughts arise when you're sitting. It's almost as if you're creating the space in which they can arise. And the reality is that many people have some quite creative thoughts when they're practicing. And it's not something to sort of, resist or think I'm doing something wrong. But it's about, the thought arises, and then what happens next is really important. Am I choosing to welcome but not feed that thought? Then it will pass. I see you, but this is not the moment for entertaining you. And to return to the body, return to the breathing, but not in any way to feel that there's something amiss if those thoughts arise. That they can actually be quite useful, but you don't immediately need to jump into perhaps a more familiar way of being with those thoughts. So I need to do something with this, or I need to go into this, or I need to think this now. In one of the discourses when the Buddha speaks about the development of samadhi, he says a person who is well trained in this pathway will think the thoughts they want to think when they want to think them, and they won't think the thoughts they don't want to think. And they are called the masters of thought. That's quite a high bar, by the way. But yes, to see without feeding.
Thank you very much. And yes, I've had very creative thoughts.
Yeah.
When I'm doing this, it's just like you say, just seeing them and letting them go. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joanne. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time, and I want to leave a moment for Christina to just mention some of her upcoming programs and how you might continue to work with her if you're interested. And just quickly first, thank you for participating in Meditation Month and for being here today. If you've benefited from these offerings, Tricycle is a nonprofit, and we offer many programs like this free of charge. We really appreciate your support. So if you would like to donate, the link is in the chat. It's just tricycle.org/donate. And Christina, why don't you tell us about how some of our participants here today might continue to practice and study with you?
Well, I've been very touched by this hour, in truth. It makes me more and more aware of how many people are out there, quite sincerely practicing, and yet often without access to anyone or any place where they can ask the kind of questions you've been asking this evening. And in the latter part of last year, I ran a mentoring program which was really about offering a space like this. And it was actually so lovely, really lovely program to teach, where I wasn't doing so much teaching, very little teaching, but really creating the space for people to raise their questions and, feel less alone actually on their path. So this evening has just really reminded me of that. Most of the teaching I'm doing these days, I'm doing through Bodhi College, and most of it is actually online. As I was saying before you all came on, the double whammy of the pandemic and then Brexit basically upended my world. So I've really found, the huge benefits of teaching online and how it includes so many people who wouldn't be able to go to face-to-face retreats or programs, for so many reasons. A new appreciation of what a privilege that has been and is for some people. So thank you. You can look up the Bodhi College website. Most of my teaching is on there. To thank you. Thank you for your questions this evening. They've been really wonderful. Yeah, and I'm sure for each of you who've asked a question, it might be the question of, 20 or 30 other people who, who didn't get to ask it. So thank you so much. And yeah, wishing you really well in your path and in your life.
And a quick reminder too that we are only halfway through the month, so there's more to come. And I hope you all got a little bit of extra encouragement to continue your practice for the rest of Meditation Month. So thank you again, Christina, for everything you've been doing for us this month, and apologies to those who did not get a chance to ask their questions today. We hope you'll continue on with Meditation Month, and we look forward to seeing you at another Tricycle event soon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.